Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this bill is as pure a distillation as any I can think of the urban-rural divide. We know that there are a lot of pieces to that: economic differences, political differences, culture and value differences, differences in life experience. But I think the most difficult piece, the one that makes solutions so hard and that makes future solutions in relationships so hard, centers on respect, or more accurately, disrespect. We need to remember that the families and produced livestock in wolf country don't want them there. To them, wolves mean danger and damage and loss and long, long nights out in the cold, going to amazing lengths to keep them away from their cattle. The rest of us collectively, mostly on the west side, decided that wolves should be welcome in Oregon, and our ranchers have been the ones bearing the cost, measured in animals who are killed, lower birth rates, more stillborn calves, emotional wounds, and more hours working out in the dark and cold than just about any of us in this chamber would be willing to spend. They didn't ask for any of this, but they have it. These folks believe they deserve respect for bearing these costs and doing the work, and I do too. Listening to ranchers and farmers and their families for 3 sessions now, describing what it takes to coexist with wolves, what I hear underneath is, please respect us. Understand and respect what we and we alone have to do for wolves to survive in the place that's been our home for generations. What we have to remember is the nature of the non-lethal deterrent work that providers undertake in cooperation with field staff from ODFW. In order to get any compensation at all for livestock killed by wolves, they first have to show they've taken part in good faith in non-lethal activity. That's one side of this program that's not well understood. Another is that the kills are carefully verified by agency staff before they're eligible for compensation. Another is that all compensation is approved by citizen committees on a case-by-case basis. 18 counties have these committees, which by statute include 2 members who support wolf conservation or coexistence with wolves. This is not some kind of good old boys racket. Doesn't mean that every case plays out with perfect fairness. I don't know a program where that happens, but there are checks and balances that work. What worries me are 2 related trends. Participation by providers in the hard work of non-lethal programs is dropping fast, while illegal poaching of wolves is rising. We are plainly losing the willingness of providers to do this preventative work. And without it, I don't see how wolves make it in Oregon. You can't put enough armed law enforcement out into these remote areas to protect them. It takes the collaboration that this bill encourages. The bill's a product of some give from both sides, including a lower and narrower multiplier than some states provide, and a higher minimum percentage that has to go to non-lethal programs. Some dedicated wolf advocates don't like it at all, largely because it came out without a stakeholder process. I understand that, might feel the same way in their shoes. They have authentic passion, positive intentions, and a lot of work invested in all this. But an intense stakeholder process was tried in the last long session, and it did not end well. Stakeholders seemed to leave the table more divided and angrier at each other than when they started. We actually lost ground. This session, we're trying something different. Instead of another long set of negotiations, we're putting a specific proposal on the table, one that drew largely from the common ground that was reached in those negotiations, saying this looks fair to us. It could become law as it is, or other legislators might choose to modify it. But either way, this path is more likely to bring us finally to resolution, much more likely than another work group, likely another fiery battle and more division that may or may not lead to an agreement someday. The trends tell me Oregon wolves can't wait for that. Mr. President, this is about securing the survival of wolves in our state and about respecting what rural Oregonians do for the rest of us to make that possible. Please join me in conveying that respect with your support for Senate Bill 777.